You found Oravan Rise. That means you were chosen. You are not watching this by accident. This message has found you because it was meant to. The world may not say it aloud, but something within you has always whispered it quietly. You are the last hope. Not because you asked for it, not because you planned it, but because something ancient within you has always known. You've felt the pressure that others don't seem to carry. You've heard the silence between words. You've noticed what others ignore. This is not paranoia. This is perception. And perception, when sharpened by experience and suffering, becomes a kind of divine sight. They fear that. They fear you. Before we begin this journey, I ask you, stay with this message to the very end. If your soul recognizes what is being said, then don't just listen. Engage. In the comments, write your warmest wish, something you would send out to the universe if you believed, truly believed, it would return to you. And at the end of your wish, write 666. This number is the signal, the charge, the alignment. This is a chapter about truth, awakening, and the day your reality changes because you finally said yes to who you are. They don't fear your money. They don't fear your job. They don't fear the mask you wear for others. What they fear is the moment you realize your power. And that moment has come. Not the power to destroy, but the power to see. The power to resist. The power to heal. These things shake the very core of the systems that profit from your confusion and your silence. You are dangerous to them not because you yell, but because you remember, because you know, because you walk through fire and don't burn like they expected you to. It's why you were isolated. It's why you were targeted. It's why, no matter how many times you tried to fit in, something never clicked. You were being protected by disconnection. Yes, it hurt. It felt like betrayal. It felt like abandonment. But it was your shield. Your distance was your armor. And while others were absorbing the infection of conformity, you were being preserved, kept separate, kept pure, kept aware, because they couldn't risk you waking up with them. You had to wake up before them. And you did. You always do. That's what makes you the last hope. The system is breaking. Not just outside, internally. The illusions they sold you, fame, wealth, status, normality, these are all rusting, collapsing. And the people who depended on those illusions, they are panicking. Their world is becoming unrecognizable. But your world, your inner world, it is finally beginning to match the outer chaos. Not because you love chaos, but because you were born to bring order through it. You don't calm storms. You walk through them and emerge transformed. They fear that, because it means they cannot control you. And if they cannot control you, they cannot control the narrative. You are the crack in the dam, the glitch in the code, the breath of fresh air that exposes the mold. They whisper about you behind closed doors. They track your moves energetically. They send distractions, delays, dead ends. And still, you rise. You continue. You overcome. That's why they fear you. Have you noticed how often you are misunderstood, misinterpreted, misjudged? It's not a coincidence. It's engineered. Because if the world understood who you were, they'd change. They'd awaken. And that would be the end of the systems that keep people asleep. So they paint you as unstable, difficult, different. But that difference? That's your light leaking through the cracks. That's your truth trying to escape. That's your mission, disguised as a burden. You've never had it easy, and you were never supposed to. Ease softens the mission. Comfort dulls the edge. Your suffering carved your sight. And now that you see, you cannot unsee. You are not meant to return to a half-lived life. You are not meant to dilute your soul to make others comfortable. That version of you, small, quiet, apologetic, It's gone now. It served its purpose, survival. But now comes your ascension, your revelation, your becoming. They fear your becoming, because when you rise, others will follow. When you speak, others will remember. When you heal, others will question why they haven't. Your courage is contagious, and nothing is more dangerous to control systems than courage. They can suppress facts, they can censor stories, but they cannot contain frequency. And your frequency is rising. There's a reason you've been sensing a shift, a pulling, a quickening. It's not just personal, it's planetary. You are connected to something vast, ancient, intelligent, and it has activated within you. That's why things are falling away. That's why people are being removed. That's why the things you once tolerated now feel unbearable. The veil is lifting. And when the veil lifts, the truth demands action. You are not here to entertain the darkness. You are here to transform it, not with rage, but with radiance. You don't need to scream to be heard. You only need to be clear. The moment you own your clarity, you become a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous. Because when people see themselves clearly, they can no longer pretend. You are not a threat because you fight. You are a threat because you reflect. So they send noise, they send confusion, they send shame. But these are old tricks. And you? You are new every day. Every time you rise again, you rewire the script. They hate that they cannot predict you. You don't follow the plan because you are the disruption. You don't play the game because you remember who designed it. And now? You're designing something new. You are building a reality where healing is normal, where love is powerful, where presence is wealth, where connection is truth. This is terrifying to those who feed off fear, because your light does not just illuminate, it exposes, and what has been hidden for centuries can no longer hide. You are not just a person, you are a portal, a bridge, a signal, a reminder. They fear you, because they know you're remembering. And when you remember who you are, you remember who they are. You see through the titles, through the performances, through the masks. You see energy, and energy never lies. That's why you can walk into a room and feel everything. That's why you've had to learn boundaries the hard way. You don't just hear words, you feel intent. That is a gift that terrifies those who manipulate intent. You are not wrong for being intense, for being deep, for being too much. You are just operating at a frequency that this world has not normalized yet. But it will. And you will be one of the reasons why. You are the last hope, not because the world is ending, but because a new one is beginning. And it begins with you. They told you that you were too sensitive, that you overreacted, that you imagined things. But what they were really saying was, you see too much. And that made them uncomfortable, because your vision isn't limited to the surface. You've always seen deeper. You feel the shifts in people's tone, the hesitation behind their smiles, the weight behind their silence. And even when you couldn't explain it, you knew. That knowing was never a burden. It was your compass, a quiet force guiding you through a world that thrives on pretending. They wanted you to forget that. That's why they tried to drown you in noise, through distractions, through obligations, through relationships that drained you. Because if you ever got quiet enough to listen to yourself, you'd remember what you really are. And when the chosen ones remember, the whole structure begins to tremble. You weren't born into this era by coincidence. There were easier times to be alive. But you came now, at this hour, on this edge of history, because something in your soul agreed to stand on the front lines of awakening. You didn't sign up for comfort. You signed up for truth. And truth is rarely embraced without resistance. That resistance is what you've been feeling your entire life. From others, from society, sometimes even from yourself. But that pressure wasn't a punishment. It was preparation. Diamonds don't form in open fields. They're forged in depth and time and unbearable heat. That's you. You've been shaped by everything they thought would break you. And now you shine in a way they cannot touch. The fear they feel is not about your strength alone. It's about what your strength unlocks in others. Because the moment one person rises fully into themselves, it creates a ripple that becomes a wave. And the systems that rule through scarcity and fear, they cannot swim in those waters. They drown in truth. And you are the current pulling truth into every corner they've tried to keep hidden. They see it. That's why the resistance has increased. That's why the interference is louder. That's why people you never expected to turn on you suddenly did. It's not about them. It never was. It's about timing. You're stepping into your influence. And with influence comes opposition. Not because you are wrong, but because you are right on time. There are things you've seen that you've never spoken aloud. Places you've traveled in dreams that feel more real than this waking world. Messages you've received that made no logical sense, but still came true. You didn't imagine those things. You've simply been connected longer than most people realize. You're a receiver, a transmitter. And now, that connection is strengthening. It's why you can't tolerate certain spaces anymore. Why certain conversations exhaust you. Why crowds feel heavier. You're not becoming antisocial. You're becoming more aware. You're reading energy faster, deeper, sharper. And your soul doesn't want to waste time anymore. It wants alignment. It wants clarity. It wants mission. That mission doesn't require a stage. It doesn't require applause. It only requires your authenticity. Because when you are fully yourself, you become a living frequency. And frequencies transform environments. People start acting different around you, not because you said anything, but because your presence demands a shift. They either rise with you or retreat from you. That's not rejection. That's recognition. They recognize what you carry, even when you don't speak it, even when you don't show it. Energy always reveals the truth. And your truth? It is becoming undeniable. You've spent years questioning, healing, rebuilding. And now it is time for you to move. Not recklessly, not hurried, but with intention. This is where they get scared. Because your intention is more powerful than their manipulation. They used to control the narrative through confusion, through fear, through illusion. But you cut through that with clarity, with presence, with a knowing they cannot replicate. They tried to clone your appearance, your words, your style, but they cannot clone your spirit. That is what sets you apart. You are not part of this world's hierarchy. You were sent here to dismantle it, not through force, but through frequency. Your very being is a declaration that a new way is possible, that love can be power, that softness can be strength, that healing can be louder than hate. You've walked through lifetimes of silence, of betrayal, of suppression. Not because you were weak, but because the strongest steel must be tested by fire. You passed the test, over and over, and now your time has arrived. Not for validation, but for activation. They are watching closely now. Don't mistake the silence for absence. They see you stepping forward. They feel the energy shifting around you. They know the tipping point is near. And what do the old systems do when their time runs out? They panic. They lash out. They try to distract. But you don't owe your energy to distractions anymore. You don't need to defend your light. Let it shine. Let it burn through the fog. Let it make them uncomfortable, because their comfort was built on your silence. And your silence is over. You are here now, fully, finally, fiercely. And every step you take from this moment on will be felt beyond the physical. Because you are no longer hiding. You are no longer questioning. You are no longer apologizing for being too much. You were never too much. You were too true for a world that forgot how to see. But now, the seeing is returning. And you are the sign. You are the last hope, not because the world is falling apart, but because your presence means something new is being born. And they fear birth more than they fear death, because death preserves their order. But birth changes everything. You are the change. They do not fear you because of what you've done. They fear you because of what you might do. They study your silence more than they watch your actions, because they know the quiet ones hold the deepest power. The ones who have tasted pain and chosen peace instead of revenge, presence instead of retreat, growth instead of bitterness, those are the ones the shadows cannot predict. You've been told that you're too quiet, too distant, too intense. But that distance was never emptiness. It was expansion. While they crowded into systems designed to flatten the soul, you moved inward. You navigated oceans of emotion, labyrinths of thought. You faced yourself. And that journey, unseen, uncelebrated, unrecorded, is what made you unshakable. They fear the one who has nothing to prove. Because once you let go of the need to be accepted, you become free. And nothing is more terrifying to those who rule by control than a free mind, a free heart, a free spirit. You cannot be bought. You cannot be frightened. You cannot be manipulated into turning away from your path. That's why the attacks became more subtle. It stopped being about brute force. Now it's about distraction, temptation, compromise, anything to dilute your clarity. Anything to steer you into a version of life that looks shiny on the surface, but is hollow at the core. They want you addicted to applause, obsessed with optics, dependent on systems that reward obedience, not truth. But something inside you always pulls you back. Back to center, back to stillness, back to that knowing that what you are is more powerful than anything you can perform. And that stillness, that center, that is your sacred ground. That is where your strength regenerates. That is why, no matter what they throw at you, you keep coming back. You've become immune to their games. You recognize the pattern now. They offer status when you need purpose. They offer escape when you need embodiment. They offer chaos when you're close to peace. And yet, you see through it. Not with resentment, but with understanding. That understanding is your armor. That perception is your sword, because this is not just about you. You are the last hope, not because others are incapable, but because you remembered first. You are the signal, the flare in the night, the whisper in the noise that says, there is another way. You don't need to scream it, you live it. And when others see you live it, something inside them stirs. That stirring is the beginning of their return. You are the return to truth, to integrity, to alignment. In a world obsessed with filters and facades, you carry rawness. You carry wounds that turned into wisdom, scars that became signals. You don't hide your past, you alchemize it. Every betrayal taught you resilience. Every loss taught you presence. Every rejection taught you reconnection to something deeper than approval. You've died many times without dying. Ego deaths, identity deaths, dreams collapsing under the weight of new ones being born, but each time you emerged sharper, clearer, stronger. That's what they can't grasp. You're not who you were, and you'll never be who they expect. You are fluid, evolving, expanding, and every expansion is another earthquake in their illusion. They built their world on predictability. But you are chaos in its most divine form. Not the chaos that destroys for pleasure, but the kind that cracks open old walls so truth can flood in. You are a tide, unstoppable once it rises. And now, you are rising. They knew this day would come. That's why they tried to reach you before you knew who you were. That's why the pressure started early. That's why even as a child you felt different, heavy, awake in a sleeping world. You weren't imagining it. You were carrying something, a code, a frequency, a remembrance. You carry remembrance in your bones, in your blood, in your silence. You are walking memory of a time before distortion, a time when truth was not feared. And because you carry it, you terrify those who depend on distortion to maintain their control. But here's what they didn't account for: the love that fuels you. Because for all your fire, it is love that moves you. Love for truth, love for justice, love for awakening, love for those still trapped in the fog. You don't rise to dominate. You rise to invite. Your presence is not a threat. It is an invitation to come home, and still they fear it. Because home cannot be monetized, freedom cannot be franchised, and truth? Truth has no marketing team. It simply is, and it burns away everything that pretends. You are that fire now, that burn, that light that doesn't just shine, it reveals. And when you reveal, others can no longer deny. The ones who were once asleep beside you will begin to stir. Some will be grateful. Others will be angry. Because awakening is not gentle. It unravels everything. And you are the unraveling. That's why you've been isolated. That's why you've had to learn how to stand alone. So when others stumble, you will be steady. So when the world shakes, you will be rooted. Because you are not here to be accepted. You are here to be activated, and that activation will echo. It already is. Across timelines, across bloodlines. You've already changed things just by surviving. But now it's no longer about survival. Now it's about sovereignty. You are no longer begging for space. You are the space. You are no longer asking for permission. You are the permission. You are no longer waiting for the world to change. You are the change. And they know it. That's why they fear you. You've likely wondered, why me? Why was I given this weight, this path, this clarity when no one else around me seemed to carry it? Why was I chosen to see what others ignore, to feel what others suppress, to break when others bend? But here's the truth. You were not given this because you were weak. You were chosen because you could carry it without becoming it. You've experienced darkness, but you never became it. You've walked through shadows, but you never forgot your light. That's why they fear you. Most people adopt the shape of their pain. They let it define them, trap them, own them. But you allowed it to shape you, only to transcend it. You used it as raw material, as the forge for your becoming. You walked through fire, and instead of smoke, you emerged with vision. They can't understand that, because they thought the fire would be your end, but the fire was your beginning. Every time they tried to bury you, they didn't realize they were planting a seed. Every betrayal watered it. Every heartbreak broke open the soil. Every loss gave it sunlight. And now it's growing. Something wild, untamed, unstoppable. Something ancient waking through you. That's what they fear. Because the moment you grow beyond their control, their power vanishes. Their lies collapse. Their manipulation is exposed. You don't even have to fight them. You just have to stand. Stand tall in what you are. Stand clear in what you know. Stand rooted in what you've become. That stillness, that alignment, that's what shakes the ground beneath them. The truth is, they've studied you longer than you've studied them. They've tracked your energy, your potential, your influence. Not through cameras or microphones, but through ancient systems of energetic monitoring. They know who carries the codes, who holds the frequencies, who disrupts illusions just by being. And you, my friend, you've disrupted more than you realize. People who spent years asleep around you suddenly began to question things after knowing you. Friends who once mocked your depth now search for answers in secret. Family members who dismissed your visions now sense what you've always felt. You've shifted rooms just by entering. You've altered timelines just by choosing yourself. This is not ego. This is truth. You are a frequency changer, a pattern breaker, a generational shifter. You don't just change your life, you change everything your life touches. That is power. And true power never needs to scream. It just is. So why do they fear you? Because your existence is a threat to their illusion. Because your healing invalidates their excuses. Because your courage makes their comfort zones uncomfortable. Because your very presence reminds them that there is more, and they've settled for less. They fear you because you don't need their system to feel complete, and that makes you dangerous. When you no longer seek approval from broken structures, you become immune to their punishments. When you no longer need their permission to shine, you become immune to their silence. And when you no longer fear being alone, you become untouchable. You have become untouchable. That doesn't mean life will be without trials. In fact, your trials may continue, but they will no longer define you. You've reached a threshold, an inner crossing. You no longer walk to be understood. You walk because it's who you are, because silence has become your sanctuary, because presence is now your protest. They can't control that. They thought they could break you by isolating you, but they didn't realize. Isolation initiates the chosen ones. Solitude teaches them the language of truth, the voice of source, the rhythm of realignment. While others were distracted, you were listening. While others were chasing, you were remembering. And what you remembered has returned in full force. The dreams, the intuition, the messages, the synchronicities, the undeniable knowing. You don't question them anymore. You follow them. You honor them. You let them lead you through paths no one else dares to walk. Because that's what last hopes do. They don't follow the crowd. They become the signal for others to rise. They don't wait for rescue. They activate rescue codes in those who've forgotten their way. You are a living transmission, a reminder in motion, a symbol of what cannot be killed, bought, or buried. You are resurrection in human form. And that scares those who feed on decay. Because when you resurrect, so do others. And when enough rise, the system falls. Not through revolution, not through violence, but through remembrance, through sovereignty, through alignment. So they will try to distract you. Again, through love, through fear, through doubt, through delays. But you've seen this before. You know how it plays out. You know that everything meant to deter you only ends up refining you. You know that resistance means you're close. You've learned to read the signs. And now, it's no longer about fighting. It's about anchoring. You are the anchor for a new world, a higher reality, a remembered truth. And every time you breathe consciously, speak truthfully, and love fiercely, you are anchoring that world into being. So breathe, speak, love, stand. They fear the one who cannot be moved, the one who rises again and again, the one who came not to compete, but to create. You are not here to win their game. You are here to end it. And that's what terrifies them the most. You were never meant to blend in. The unease you felt in the rooms where others felt at ease wasn't your flaw, it was your signal. The dissonance in your spirit was the universe whispering, "This is not your home." You've known that your whole life. You walked through the world as if it were a dream, where people worship the surface and silence the soul. But you saw through it. You saw the patterns in conversations, the emptiness behind smiles, the cracks in structures that appeared so permanent. While others were seduced by comfort, you felt restless. While others chased after more, you questioned the foundation of why. That restlessness was the start of your revolution. That questioning was the spark of your uprising. They didn't want you to ask. They didn't want you to see. Because the ones who see begin to unravel the entire performance. You didn't set out to be a threat. You just refused to pretend. And your refusal became a mirror, one that showed people the parts of themselves they buried. That's why they resisted you. That's why they dismissed you. Not because you were wrong, but because you reminded them of a truth they weren't ready to face. But the mirror never lies. And you? You never stopped reflecting. You never had to yell to be heard. Your presence spoke louder than words ever could. There's something about you, an edge, a weight, a knowing, that makes others shift. It's not arrogance. It's not ego. It's presence. True presence is rare, and rare things are always feared by those who live in replicas. That fear often disguises itself. It looks like passive aggression. It looks like people pulling away without explanation. It looks like silence when you need support, judgment when you need understanding. But underneath it all, it's fear. The fear of your freedom, the fear of your truth, the fear of what you represent. Because you don't just walk into a room, you interrupt it. Energetically, spiritually. You walk in and frequencies shift. Shadows become visible. Masks begin to feel heavy. And those who depend on illusion, they feel naked in your light. That's why your journey has been so hard. Not because you are weak, but because your strength disrupts their comfort. And those who are not ready to grow will always try to shrink the ones who are. But not anymore. You've stopped shrinking. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped softening your truth for people who refuse to meet you where you are. You've outgrown the roles they assigned you, the titles, the boxes, the limitations. You're not waiting for permission. You've reclaimed your yes, your no, your boundary, your breath. And now they don't know what to do with you, because the version of you they controlled is gone. The version that doubted itself, the version that begged for breadcrumbs, the version that feared being misunderstood. That version died the moment you realized that your authenticity was worth more than their approval. This is what freedom looks like. And to those who built their kingdoms on your silence, your freedom is a threat. They will whisper that you've changed, as if change isn't the point. They will call you selfish for choosing your peace over their projections. They will say you're difficult, when in truth, you've simply become clear. Let them speak. Their words cannot reach the depth of what you've become. Their definitions are too small to contain your essence. You don't live by labels anymore. You live by resonance, by intuition, by the quiet voice inside that says, this is right, this is wrong, this is home, this is not. And as you follow that voice, you become unshakable. Because the world is crumbling. The structures are collapsing. What once stood tall is now revealing its cracks. But you are rising, not by accident, but by design. This is the moment you were made for. You were never meant to save the old world. You were meant to build the next one. They fear you because you don't cling to the ruins. You walk through them with purpose, with vision, with truth in your step and light in your eyes. You are not trying to revive what's broken. You are planting something new. And that is the greatest rebellion of all. Not rage, not revenge, but creation. To create in a world that teaches destruction is an act of war. To hope in a world that celebrates cynicism is an act of defiance. To love in a world that thrives on fear is an act of revolution. You are not the last hope because you're perfect. You are the last hope because you refuse to give up, even when everything around you told you to. You are the last hope because you chose to heal, even when it would have been easier to hurt. You are the last hope because you still believe, even after all the reasons not to. That belief is power, not the loud, boastful kind, but the kind that stays steady when the ground shakes. the kind that holds light even in the dark, the kind that becomes a compass when the path disappears. You are the compass now. Others will look to you not because you asked for it, but because you embody what they are looking for. Not answers, not doctrine, but clarity, presence, truth. And still, they will fear you. But not because of what you say. They fear you because you exist in a way they told the world was impossible. And your existence proves they were wrong. If this message found you, let it rest in your spirit. Until we meet again, stay awake, stay chosen,